What's up, Pinedale kids? I am super excited about today's Church at Home video. We are going to have a guest teacher. This is the first lesson in almost a year where I haven't been the teacher for you guys. Today's superhero is the loner. Now, I suspect that most of you, when you watch the bumper video for this series, you notice that all of our superheroes look like superheroes out of the movies, just slightly different, and it bugs some of you. Yep, that's because I needed someone to represent our Bible heroes. Plus, they aren't exactly like the movie characters. Well, today's superhero is the loner, and we chose to represent him with a modified version of Batman. I know, there are some of you that when you look at that image, it really annoys you because he doesn't have any ears. Get over it. You make me a better image and I will use it next time. As you guys know, my favorite superhero in the movies is Superman. That's who I grew up watching. Well, when I think of Batman, there's this one guy who comes to mind who is obsessed with Batman. And he used to be on staff here at Pinedale. His name is Ryan Evans. And that's who's going to be teaching today's lesson. You're gonna love what he has to say. He's got a couple of really funny stories. But first, let me give you a quick review. We started off talking about Promise Man, better known as Abraham. He believed God's promises. Then there was the Flash. His real name is Joseph. Joseph was a superhero because he ran away from sin. Then we took a look at Invisible Shield Man. His real name is Moses. From the moment he was born, he had an invisible shield that was protecting him. And who was that invisible shield? Yes, it was God. Our girl superhero was the prayer warrior. She's not the only girl superhero in the Bible, but the only one that we looked at. Her real name is Esther, and she was a superhero because she believed in the power of prayer and knew that prayer could change things. Next, we talked about G.I. Joshua, and his real name is easy to remember because it's part of his superhero name, and that is Joshua. Joshua is a hero because he stood up to sin and fought against it. Last week, we learned about Captain Israel, and his real name is Gideon. He was a hero because he knew who he was, and he believed who God said he was. Today, we're going to talk about the loner. Turns out you know him better as Daniel, but that's the Bible Daniel, as in like Daniel in the Lion's Den, not Daniel Dominguez or Daniel Baranowski or Danny Spainhour. Before we do our praise and worship time and our prayer time with Denise, I want to remind you about our countdown to Christmas. So watch this promo video, and then we're going to jump right into our worship, followed by a prayer time, and then a great lesson from Ryan Evans. I won't have a chance at the end to say goodbye to you, so I'm going to go and tell you bye-bye right now, but keep watching the video. But first, watch this promo video.
Day in history, death has beaten, you have rescued me. Sing it out, Jesus is alive. Empty cross and empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day. Shout it out, Jesus is alive. He's alive. Jesus, you are mine. In this joy, perfect peace, earthly pain finally will cease. Celebrate, Jesus is alive. Yeah, he's alive. Oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Oh no, forever I am changed. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious way that you have saved me. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious name. Yeah. Oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day,
So today we have a special treat for you. Our lesson is going to be given by our former middle school minister, Ryan Evans. And some of you may be like, who's that? Well, he used to work at Pinedale, he used to be our middle school minister, and he's a pretty cool guy. He's going to give us our lesson on our superhero for today, and he is the loner, also known as Daniel, and one of my favorite Bible characters. I'm excited to hear his lesson, and I know that we'll all get a lot out of it. But as we prepare for it, let's think about Daniel and how he was the loner. He stood up for God when he was the only one, and he had to have a lot of courage to do that. And in order to have a lot of courage to do that, he had to pray. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to God, and we're going to pray that he would give us the courage to stand up when maybe we're the only one. Maybe we are the only one, and maybe we feel like we're the only one, because sometimes, even if there are other believers in a group, it may not stand out as much, or maybe we don't realize it. So let's ask God to give us the courage to stand up for him and to pull out that superhero strength that Daniel had. All right, so and of course you can pray for any other requests that you may have. I just really want to encourage you to get somewhere where you can block everything out, block out all those distractions. And I'd also like to encourage you to say your prayers out loud, okay? Because we're not ashamed. And this is a perfect day, this lesson, when we're talking about the loner and standing up when we're the only one. It's a perfect day to, maybe if you've never said your prayers out loud, maybe it's a good time to do that. We don't say our prayers out loud so that we can be proud or show off. We say our prayers out loud because we're not ashamed, and because we want others to know that we believe in God, and we know that he hears us, and we know that he will answer. Alright, so go ahead and get somewhere still and quiet, block out all distractions, close your eyes, lift up those prayers to God, and I will close us out. Dear God, thank you for this lesson today and for this opportunity to hear about Daniel and how you gave him the courage to stand up when no one else was believing in you and no one else was standing up for you. I pray that you would help us to follow his example, that you would help us to have that same strength and courage, and that we would remember that we're not really by ourselves, that you are with us. Help us to remember that in the middle of those times, and wherever we may be. Help us to shine your light, help us to be bold, and to be the salt and the light, the hands and the feet that you would have us to be to the world. Sometimes we are Jesus to those around us, and I pray that you would help us to do just that. I pray that you do with every request going up right now, with everyone who is praying. I pray that you would just help them to know that you're hearing, and I thank you for answering in the very best way. We love you so much. It's in Jesus' name I pray. And all God's kids said, amen.
thank you so much for letting me join you today. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm a student minister at Crossroads Christian Church in Tennessee. And you're probably wondering why Sean would ask me to teach you all a lesson. Well, there's probably a few reasons. One, it's because I used to work at Pinedale. That's actually where I started ministry at. I love Pinedale. I still consider Pinedale my church family. In fact, we just had a newborn daughter, and we were so bummed because we wanted to come to Pinedale and get to see our friends and family and share a little newborn with them. We'll still make it out there eventually. But you should probably also recognize by now that I'm a little bit of a Batman fan. In fact, if you can see, I have a nice polo t-shirt with batarangs all over it. Sean knows that I'm a huge Batman fan. And today we're talking about the loner. And I was wondering what the connection was until I watched that little intro bumper reel and realized that the loner is just Batman with the ears cut off. You know what I mean? But yeah, you know what? This is actually a funny story. When I worked at Pinedale, Sean was doing this lesson one time, and he asked me and some others to dress up as superheroes and come to a tug of war on stage. So obviously, I was gonna dress up as Batman. So we all get up there and we're introducing ourselves, and I had a little rubber batarang. And I get up to the front of the stage and I'm like talking to Batman, going, "Hi, I'm Batman." And then I took the batarang and my goal was to throw it into the crowd and maybe even all the way to the back of the room. But instead of throwing it back, I threw it just a little bit low and it went and drilled this lady on the front row in the face. Which is not my best moment in ministry, but it did happen. Goodness. But it was a blast, and I miss my time at Pinedale, and I love the people there. But I love Batman because Batman is such a loner. Batman is one of those people that follows the rules even when everyone else doesn't want to. He sticks to his code, and he doesn't use guns, and he doesn't kill. And a lot of times it actually separates him from other superheroes because they're annoyed at how strict he is and how he won't go against what he believes in. And you're probably wondering why as Christians we would ever want to be loners. Well, here's the thing. Some people might tell you that being a Christian means everything's going to work out and be perfect and nothing ever wrong is going to happen. That is so not true. In fact, the Bible pretty much guarantees us that as Christians we will face persecution. We will have people come against us. We will have people tell us that we're wrong or even try to punish us for being Christians. That's going to happen sometimes. Now, you all probably don't deal with that, but here's the thing. For those of you who are in school and maybe have friends, sometimes it's not cool to be a Christian. Sometimes it's not popular to do the right thing. Sometimes it's hard when your friends are doing things that you know are wrong and you kind of want to just do it along with them, but instead you have to be a loner and step away and do the right thing. I know for me, when I was younger, I just would do anything that I thought I could do to be popular, to fit in with the cool kids. I would dress the way they dressed. I would wear what they wore. I would talk like they talked. I would do the activities that they did just because I wanted to fit in so badly. And I know that's a temptation for a lot of us. But as Christians, we're called to be loners and stand out and make the tough decisions to stand up for Jesus. And today we're going to look at a really cool story in the Bible about a guy named Daniel who was a loner, who had to make a really tough decision, a life or death decision on whether he was going to keep doing what was right or follow along with everyone else and do what was wrong. So will you all watch that story with me? Here it comes.
Stories of the Bible. Daniel in the Lion's Den. This is Daniel.
Oh, hey!
Who was a Jewish man who was taken to Babylon when he was very young.
Yeah.
Daniel loved God and followed God's rules. He talked to God 3 times a day and asked God for help often. Daniel served in the Babylonian king's court for many years.
Yeah, I know him.
And under many kings.
Hey, Daniel.
Daniel always proved himself to be more capable than all the other court officials.
Thanks. Well, anytime.
Daniel was serving under King Darius, and because of his great abilities, the king made plans to place him in charge of the entire empire.
Wow, okay.
The other court officials searched for some fault in Daniel, but they couldn't find anything wrong with him. He was faithful, responsible, and completely trustworthy.
Wait.
The court officials realized the only way to get at Daniel would be to challenge his faith.
Come on.
So they went to King Darius
Excuse me, Your Majesty.
and advised him to make a law that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone except King Darius will be thrown into the lion's den.
I like it.
King Darius signed this law, and once a Babylonian king signed a law, it could not be overruled. When Daniel learned of this law, he went home and knelt down, as he always did, to pray in his room with the windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he always had done, giving thanks to God and asking for his help. The officials went to Daniel's house and found him praying.
Gotcha.
They went to the king and reminded him of the law.
I remember.
Well,
Then they said that Daniel had been found praying to God 3 times a day.
What?
When the king heard this, he was very upset,
Get over here.
and he spent the whole day trying to think of a way to save Daniel.
wait, what?
By that evening, the court officials came back to the king and reminded him that no law signed by the Babylonian king could be overruled. So at last, the king gave orders for Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. The king said to him, "May your God, who you serve faithfully, rescue you." Then the lion's den was sealed shut with Daniel inside. The king spent the night fasting and couldn't sleep. Then very early in the morning, the king hurried to the lion's den. He called out,
Hey, Daniel.
"Was your God able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, "Long live the king! My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight." The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be taken out of the lion's den. Then the king ordered the men who had schemed against Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den as punishment. Daniel was safe. There was not a scratch on him, for he trusted in God.
Would you do that? Would you go into a lion's den to go against the rules? Would you stand up for what you believe in despite the fact that it means you could potentially die? Do you trust God that much? I don't know if I was as brave as Daniel was. That's tough. I mean, the thing is, we don't have a king. We don't necessarily have lion's den punishment types things. But there are a lot of examples in real life of how we have to follow Daniel's example. In fact, there's a really neat story about a guy that I know of named Kenneth Boer. Now, Kenneth was one of those all-star athletes. He played baseball, he played football, he played other things. And by the time he turned 16, going into his junior year of high school, he was set to start at quarterback for his high school football team. Needless to say, Kenneth was kind of a cool guy. But over the summer, Kenneth was faced with a really tough decision. His coach told him that he had to come to practice in order to start for his football team. But his church was doing a mission trip, and Kenneth really wanted to go on the mission trip. He really believed that God was calling him to go on this mission trip. And his coach told him, if you go on that mission trip, if you skip practice, then you will not start a single football game all year long. I bet some of you have coaches like that. I bet some of you athletes out there might be able to connect with this story a little bit. What do you do between the tension of following God and maybe following a sport that you love? Well, Kenneth made the tough decision to go on the mission trip. Despite the fact that his coaches were telling him not to, his teammates were telling him not to, everyone's like, please, Kenneth, don't go do this. We need you on the football team. But Kenneth chose to follow God instead. Now that is the cool part of the story. It gets even a little bit cooler actually, because here's the thing. His coach kept true to his promise. When Kenneth went to the first football game of the year and they were calling out the starting players, Kenneth's name was not on the list. He did not start. And in the last game of the season, Kenneth's name was not on the starting list. But check this out. By the really halfway through the season, even though they would put in the secondary quarterback to start the game, Kenneth would go in on the second play because he was that good. I mean, the coaches, wanted to hold true to his promise, but also you want to win the football game, am I right? And Kenneth set an example for his coaches and his teammates that was really neat. Now, this does take kind of a sad turn though, because I gotta tell you that sometime after that, Kenneth and his dad were out chopping wood, and there was a horrible accident, and a limb came free and actually struck Kenneth and killed him. And at Kenneth's funeral, they read from his journal where he had been studying scripture and praying for his friends. And in his journal, he had listed the names of his coaches and all his teammates because he was praying for all of them daily that they might know Jesus and accept him as Lord. And because of Kenneth's example, because of his willingness to be a loner even when everyone else was telling him to do something, because of his example, after his funeral, several of his teammates were actually baptized. And you're probably wondering how I know the story of Kenneth, because Kenneth actually died before I was even born. But I don't know Kenneth Boer personally. I do know Curtis Boer personally. And Curtis Boer is the lead minister at Crossroads Christian Church, the church that I work at. And he also teaches youth ministry at Milligan College, where I went to college. So I studied with Curtis while I was in college, and now I work with him as a teammate here on staff. And I know I am personally thankful for Kenneth's willingness to be a loner and set an example, because it changed Curtis' life. And Curtis's life changed my life. And that's the thing, and that's what's so cool about Kenneth's story and Daniel's story, is that when you're willing to go against the grain, when you're willing not to be pulled in the wrong direction by everyone around you, and you're willing to stand up for what you believe in, you can actually pull other people in the right direction. Daniel changed the life of the king. The king actually sent out an edict afterwards talking about how God was the one true God. And Kenneth's example of choosing God over football showed all of his teammates how important Jesus was, and they were baptized because of it. And then Kenneth also changed his brother's life. And his brother, Curtis, would be, like, I've talked to him, he said, I would have chosen football. And Curtis really wasn't living the right life, but Kenneth's example pushed him in the right direction to pursue ministry. So the question for all of you and all of us is whether or not we're willing to stand up for Jesus and do what is right. Whether we're going to show people Jesus in our everyday lives and stand up for what we believe in. And when you do that, you won't just be a loner. You might actually pull other people in the right direction as well. So will you do it? Are you willing to go against the grain, go against what is cool, not do the things that you know are wrong, and be an example for those around you of how to be a good Christian and follow Jesus? It's going to be tough. I'm just going to go ahead and warn you. But you can do it, and you can set that example. Thank you all so much for letting me join you this morning or later in the day whenever you're watching this. I love you, Pinedale family, and you all have a fantastic rest of your week. See ya!